Good evening, dear listener. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Before we begin, a quick question. Where are you listening from? I read every single comment, and I love hearing your answers. And one more thing. Most of our listeners aren't subscribed yet. If you enjoy these timeless mysteries, subscribing is the best way to support us. It's free, and it makes sure you never miss the next case. Now, settle in. Pour yourself a warm drink. Wrap that blanket a little tighter, because while the fire glows and the evening feels safe, shadows still linger at the edge of every cozy village. And sometimes, behind the glow of Christmas lights, something darker waits. So tonight, let's step together into Street Mary Mead. And tonight, our story begins with a death among the Christmas stalls. Laughter turned to silence. The Christmas market filled the village square. Children ran between stalls. Mothers carried bundles of scarves and sweets. Fathers bargained over toys. And Miss Jane Marple walked quietly among them, eyes sharp. She noticed everything. Mrs. Fletcher's thin lips tightened as she glanced at the gingerbread stall. Her mutter was bitter. Prime location again. 3 years running. Doesn't matter how long I've been here. Her words weren't meant for Miss Marple, but Marple heard. Across the square, young Timothy Mills stood behind his wooden toys. His hands shook as he arranged a small rocking horse. When Miss Marple praised his work, his smile was nervous. Didn't get a proper space, he admitted. His eyes flicked toward Margaret Thornfield's stall. That's where all the visitors go. Margaret herself stood proudly behind her gingerbread house display. Candy cane pillars, icing trim, cookies stacked with precision. Her apron spotless, her tone sharp. Standards must be kept, she declared to a customer. Her voice carried. Her pride showed. Miss Marple watched the market manager, Mr. Blackwood. He carried a clipboard, but his fingers tapped nervously against it. His smile was strained. He avoided Margaret's eyes. Then, a disturbance. A man in a fine overcoat leaned close to Margaret's stall. His words couldn't be heard, but his tone was firm. Margaret's reply was louder. If certain standards aren't maintained, adjustments must be made. Her eyes glittered as she nodded. The man gestured toward the square with disdain. Then he left. The crowd thinned as night fell. Vendors packed away their goods. Children were dragged home. Miss Marple lingered. Something in the air felt wrong. Margaret Thornfield remained at her stall. She closed the lids of her tins. She stacked her unsold biscuits, and then, with ritual care, she poured herself mulled wine from her private thermos, her special blend, not for customers, only for her. Miss Marple knew this habit. Everyone knew it. Margaret liked to boast of her recipe. More spices, better ingredients, something proper. The steam rose from the cup. The smell was sweet, heavy with cloves and cinnamon. Then Margaret stiffened. Her face twisted. Her hands shook. The cup crashed to the cobblestones. Her body staggered. Her throat caught on a broken cry. Help! Help me! She clutched at her chest. Her knees buckled. Miss Marple hurried forward, but it was too late. Margaret Thornfield collapsed among her carefully stacked gingerbread cookies. The sweet smell of mulled wine carried a new note. Bitter. Acrid. Wrong. Poison. And so the market's joy ended with silence. Inspector Slack arrived with brisk steps. His coat swung behind him. His eyes swept the square. Cheerful lights still twinkled above the stalls, but no one smiled now. Vendors huddled in silence. Whispers carried like smoke in the cold air. Doctor. Haddock knelt beside the body. His hands moved with care, but his face was grim. He sniffed the spilled mulled wine. Then he leaned, closer to Margaret's lips. A slow nod followed. Slack's voice cut the air. Well, doctor? Cyanide, Haddock said simply. Strong dose. It acted fast. The word spread quickly. Murder. Murder at the Christmas market. Slack turned to the crowd. Statements from everyone. Now, who spoke to her? Who touched her stall? Who lingered nearby? The vendors shifted uneasily. Mrs. Fletcher raised her chin. She kept that thermos under the counter, always separate. That drink wasn't for us. It was her little ritual. Timothy Mills spoke next, voice low. She told me once. Said a proper businesswoman deserved proper comforts. Slack scribbled notes. Thermos. Private. Not for customers. Important detail. Mr. Blackwood wrung his hands. Yes, she used cardamom. Vanilla. Too expensive to waste on the public. Everyone knew it. Slack frowned. Then whoever did this knew her habits. They knew she'd drink from that thermos at closing time. Dr. Haddock straightened. The timing is clear. Poison added no more than half an hour before she drank. This wasn't done in the morning. It was recent. Slack's eyes narrowed. So the killer was still here. One of you. Watching. Waiting. The silence deepened. The cheerful glow of the stalls seemed to mock the crowd. Mrs. Fletcher muttered under her breath. Not all of us had reason to wish her well. Slack snapped his gaze toward her. What was that? Only that she made enemies, she said stiffly. She enjoyed it. Timothy shifted nervously. She told me I didn't belong here, that my toys weren't good enough. Blackwood's voice trembled. She increased everyone's fees, threatened to replace vendors. It wasn't unexpected that someone would hate her. Slack tapped his pencil against the page. Motive is not in short supply. Doctor. Haddock looked to Miss Marple, who had been silent until now. Her eyes were calm, but watchful. She spoke softly, her words carrying weight. The poison was not placed in the wine served to the customers, only in her private cup. That is most revealing. Slack grunted. How so? It tells us the killer was not reckless, Marple replied. They had no wish to endanger the market itself. They wanted Margaret. Only Margaret. Her gaze swept the square. The killer poisoned not the public drink, but her private ritual. And with that quiet reflection, the chill of murder sank deeper into Street Mary Mead. The market square no longer felt festive. The lights still burned, but the cheer had gone. Voices dropped to whispers. Faces turned pale. Inspector Slack moved through the crowd. Names. Details. Every one of you spoke with her. Every one of you had a grievance. Let's hear it. Mrs. Fletcher spoke first. Her voice cracked with anger. She stole my place. 3 years in a row, she stood in that corner, prime spot. My scarves and mittens pushed to the shadows. Her chin trembled. She told me yesterday I didn't meet her new standards. Standards? I've been here since the market began. Her eyes flashed toward the body. She ruined everything for me. Everything. Timothy Mills stepped forward next. His hands twisted together. I asked for a proper stall this year. She said no. Said my toys weren't good enough for her market. He swallowed hard. She told me modern parents wanted certified toys. Machines. Plastic. Not wood. His words shook, but the bitterness was clear. I worked months. Carved each one. She didn't even look at them. Slack scribbled fast. And you, Blackwood? The market manager shifted uneasily. His shoulders sagged. Margaret handled fees. She raised them every year. Told me it was for improvements, but nothing changed. She collected and collected, never explained. He lowered his voice. She made decisions without consulting anyone. Vendors trusted me, but she kept me blind. Slack's eyes hardened. So, Fletcher resented her. Mills was excluded. Blackwood undermined. Anyone else want to speak? The group stirred uneasily. A farmer muttered about stall costs. Another vendor spoke of being told his jams weren't professional enough. One after another, small grudges spilled into the cold night. Miss Marple stood quietly at the edge. Her eyes noted every word, every gesture. Resentment filled the square like smoke. Old hurts, fresh wounds, long whispers Margaret had sown them all. Slack lifted his hand. Enough. We'll gather formal statements later. But hear this. His gaze swept across them. One of you added poison to that thermos. One of you knew her ritual. And one of you stayed long enough to watch her die. Silence. Breath froze in the cold. The only sound was the flutter of Christmas bunting. Then Mrs. Fletcher spoke again, her tone sharper now. I saw her with someone. Not one of us. Slack turned sharply. Describe. A man. Fine overcoat. Looked expensive. Spoke low, but she answered loud. She was angry. Timothy Mills nodded quickly. I saw him too. He left near 7. Walked toward the car park. Slack leaned closer. You're certain? Certain, Timothy said. He stood by her stall. She was heated. Mrs. Fletcher's voice dropped. He wasn't from here. Not village folk. Too polished. Too cold. Slack closed his notebook with a snap. Then we have another player. The crowd shifted nervously. A stranger among them. A man with an overcoat. Seen with Margaret moments before she died. The square fell silent again. The Christmas market had gained a new suspect. Who is he? The question moved through the square like a gust of wind. Whispers grew louder. Eyes searched one another. Every villager felt the same unease. A stranger had been here. A stranger had argued with Margaret. And now Margaret was dead. Inspector. Slack raised his hand. Quiet. We'll get to the bottom of this. His gaze fell on Blackwood. You know him, don't you? Blackwood hesitated, his lips pressed together. His eyes darted toward the gingerbread stall, as though the painted candy canes might shield him. Finally, he spoke. Yes, I know who he is. The crowd leaned closer. Tension pressed down. His name is Charles Hendris, Blackwood continued. He's an investor. Murmurs rose. An investor. Not a villager. Not a craftsman. Not one of them. Inspector Slack's jaw tightened. Investor in what, precisely? Blackwood's voice shook. The market. He came with proposals, promises, money. He glanced at Marple, then back to Slack. Margaret was negotiating with him. For changes. Big changes. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. She said nothing, but she listened. Every word mattered. Mrs. Fletcher scoffed loudly. Changes. That woman wanted to tear the heart out of this market, and now we know who helped her. Timothy Mills looked confused. What sort of changes? Blackwood sighed heavily. Permanent stalls, professional vendors, commercial branding. Margaret believed the old ways were finished. A gasp rippled through the group. For many, the market was not just income. It was tradition, community, identity. Slack scribbled notes. When did Hendris arrive? Yesterday afternoon, Blackwood said. He met Margaret by the stall. They spoke in low tones. Later, I saw her show him documents. Slack snapped his head up. Documents? What kind? Plans. Financial papers. She didn't share them with me. Blackwood's bitterness showed. She said I wouldn't understand. Mrs. Fletcher muttered again. She always thought she was better than us. Slack barked. Enough. Focus on the man. He turned to the vendors. Did anyone else see him? Timothy raised his hand slightly. I did. Around 7. He left toward the car park. Didn't look at anyone. Walked fast. Slack noted it down. Did Margaret argue with him? Yes, Timothy said. She sounded angry. But he was calm. Cold. Slack looked to Mrs. Fletcher. You? She nodded firmly. Her voice carried. Words about standards, arrangements, timing. She was fierce. He just nodded. Slack shut his notebook. We'll track him down. Hendris will answer questions. The crowd stirred again, uneasy. The image of a wealthy stranger among their wooden stalls unsettled them more than the police tape. Miss Marple, silent until now, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the night. This was not a quarrel about one stall, Inspector. Not about one fee. Not even about a single vendor. Slack frowned. What do you mean? She looked back toward Margaret's gingerbread house. The decorations sparkled in the lamplight, but their cheer felt false. Charles Hendris did not come for biscuits, she said. He came for the market itself. A hush followed. Miss Marple's gaze lingered on the shattered thermos at her feet. This is no simple quarrel. It is a battle over the future of the market. The morning came grey and cold. Snow clung to the roofs. The market stalls looked hollow, lifeless, abandoned. Inspector Slack stood at the gingerbread house. 2 constables searched the counters. Miss Marple watched from the side, her hands folded neatly. A shout broke the silence. Sir, Found something. Slack hurried forward. The constable tugged loose a candy cane pillar. Behind it, metal, a narrow compartment, and inside, a locked box. Slack's eyes hardened. Open it. The lid creaked. Papers filled the box. Letters, contracts, receipts. Slack pulled the top one free. Miss Marple leaned closer. The words were stark, written in block capitals. You have stolen Christmas from this village. Step down or face the consequences. A chill passed through the group. Slack read another. We will not let you destroy our market. Stop now. 4 letters. All the same tone, all signed with nothing but anger. Mrs. Fletcher gasped. She was warned. Someone told her to quit. Slack's jaw set. Threats. And she ignored them. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. The handwriting is disguised, but the words, bitter, personal. Slack tucked the letters away. He rifled deeper. Bundles of papers tied with ribbon, financial records, vendor agreements, and then blueprints. He spread the sheets across the counter. The vendors gasped again. These were not festive sketches, not fairy tale designs. Cold, clinical drawings. Slack traced the lines. Permanent structures. Brick. Steel. Miss Marple pointed. Notice the spaces. Larger. Fewer. Indeed. The plans showed fewer stalls, each 3 times the size. Professional units. Heating. Electrical systems. Retail. Not community. Blackwood's face went pale. She wanted to rebuild the square, not a market. A shopping centre, Timothy whispered, horrified. Where would we go? Where would I sell? Mrs. Fletcher's voice cracked. We'd be gone, all of us. Slack slammed a hand on the counter. She was planning to replace the vendors, price them out. The truth weighed heavy. Margaret Thornfield had never been guarding tradition. She had been plotting its end. Miss Marple studied the paper with calm eyes. She presented herself as a protector, but these plans proved she was a destroyer. The constable swallowed hard. Sir, look at the title block. All heads turned. At the corner of the blueprint, neat type spelled it out. Street Mary Mead Christmas Market. Redevelopment plan. Partner, Hendris & Co. Gasps rose again. The outsider's name was there, inked into the paper. Slack's voice was low, hard. This isn't gossip anymore. This is fact. He looked at the villagers. She was selling the heart of your market to strangers. The snow outside whipped harder against the stalls. The gingerbread house seemed less like a fairy tale display now. It looked like a mask that had just been ripped away. Miss Marple's hand rested lightly on the edge of the blueprint. Her voice was steady. Margaret Thornfield was not murdered for what she had done. She was murdered for what she was about to do. The box held more than letters, more than plans. Something else lay inside. A leather-bound book, its edges worn. Its cover marked Thornfield Family Recipes. Inspector Slack lifted it out. Her family traditions, no doubt. He dropped it on the counter. The clasp snapped open. Miss Marple leaned closer. Her eyes studied the neat handwriting. Page after page of recipes. Gingerbread, mince pies, mulled wine. Slack flipped through with impatience. Domestic nonsense. What's this to us? Marple's finger paused. No, not nonsense. Look here. The gingerbread recipe. Boldly titled, passed down for generations, yet the list of ingredients. Familiar. Too familiar. Marple's eyes sharpened. This isn't hers. These measures. These notes. I know them. Slack frowned. You know them? Yes, Marple said. I've used this very recipe. It is copied straight from Mrs. Beeton's cookbook. The room went still. Slack's brow furrowed. You're certain? Quite certain, Marple said firmly. And not just this one. She turned the page. Mulled wine. Again marked Thornfield family tradition. But the writing style was different, the wording exact. Marple's lips tightened. This comes from a magazine, not a grandmother's kitchen. Mrs. Fletcher gasped. All those years she boasted, claiming her family recipes, showing them off. Marple's voice was soft but cutting. She was not preserving tradition. She was stealing it, presenting borrowed words as heritage. Slack, scowled. Forgery of taste. Timothy's fists clenched. She mocked me for carving toys no one wanted. All the while she was copying lies into a book. The constable shuffled nervously. Sir, it looks deliberate. She wrote them to look old, as if they were hers. Marple nodded slowly. She built her image on falsehoods, her stall, her gingerbread house, even her family pride. It was performance. Slack slapped the cover shut. A woman who lived on deceit and profited from it. Blackwood spoke, voice low. She made us believe she carried the past in her hands. She carried nothing. She only pretended. Marple's gaze lingered on the embossed words. Family recipes. How many villagers had trusted those words? How many had believed they were eating pieces of history? All of it false. The silence thickened. The snow tapped faintly against the stall windows. The book sat heavy on the counter, its lies exposed. Inspector Slack muttered. So she tricked everyone. She claimed she was a guardian of Christmas. She was a fraud. Marple's eyes stayed fixed on the book. Her voice was soft, but sharp as glass. She wasn't preserving tradition. She was selling lies. Inspector Slack gathered the vendors inside the town hall. The fire burned low. The room smelled of damp coats and cold air. Miss Marple sat quietly in the back, knitting needles clicking softly. Her eyes, however, missed nothing. Slack stood at the front. Each of you will speak. Each of you will tell us your dealings with Margaret Thornfield, one at a time. No interruptions. The vendors shifted uneasily. Chairs creaked. Hands fidgeted. Eyes darted from face to face. Mrs. Fletcher, Slack called. Start with you. The scarf maker rose slowly. Her fingers tugged at her shawl. Her voice was sharp, edged with years of resentment. She humiliated me, Mrs. Fletcher said. She told me my stall was old-fashioned, too plain. Said if I wanted to stay, I must upscale. Velvet displays, mannequins, colored lights, all things I cannot afford. She shook her head bitterly. I make with my hands. Simple, honest. But she said honest, wasn't enough. Slack pressed. When did she tell you this? 2 weeks ago, Mrs. Fletcher replied. She said change or be gone. Her words, change or be gone. A ripple moved through the room. Other vendors nodded grimly. They too had heard similar words. Slack's tone hardened. And what did you say to her? Mrs. Fletcher's jaw tightened. I told her the market had always been about craft, about community, about us. She laughed. Said people wanted glamour, not knitting, that I was out of step, that I didn't belong. Her voice cracked, then grew stronger again. She pushed me to the corner stall, far from the square. No one found me there. She knew what she was doing. Slack leaned forward. And how did that make you feel? Mrs. Fletcher's eyes blazed. How do you think? She took my pride. She took my living. She made me invisible. The room stirred. Timothy Mills glanced down at his hands, as though ashamed of the sympathy he felt. Blackwood rubbed his forehead, looking worn. Slack pressed again. Did you ever threaten her? No, Mrs. Fletcher snapped. Her shoulders slumped. But I wanted to. Oh, I wanted to. Her voice grew quieter. Because she told me something else. Something no one here knows. The room leaned closer. Even Miss Marple's needles paused mid-click. What was it? Slack asked. Mrs. Fletcher's lips trembled. She said this would be my last Christmas here. Gasps filled the hall. The words landed like a stone dropped in water. Ripples of suspicion spread outward. Slack's eyes narrowed. Your last Christmas? Mrs. Fletcher nodded stiffly. Yes. She looked me in the face and told me, enjoy it while you can, because next year you'll not be welcome. The hall fell silent. Every vendor felt the weight of the threat. Margaret Thornfield had not simply raised fees. She had chosen who would stay and who would go. And she had promised Fletcher she was finished. The fire popped sharply in the grate. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, suspicion deepened. Mrs. Fletcher's final words hung in the air like a noose. Margaret told me this would be my last Christmas here. Inspector Slack cleared his throat. Next, Timothy Mills. The young man rose slowly, his shoulders hunched. His hands still bore tiny cuts from the carving knife. He looked as though he wanted to sink into the floor. Slack fixed him with a sharp eye. You had words with Margaret? Timothy nodded. She rejected me. How? Timothy glanced around the hall. All eyes were on him. He swallowed. My toys. I spent the year carving them. Rocking horses, soldiers, wooden trains. She looked once and told me no. Slack leaned forward. Why? Timothy's face flushed. She said wooden toys don't sell. She said children wanted factory goods. Plastic. Shiny. She told me if I wanted a place here, I must agree to sell boxes from her supplier, mass-made toys, with my name on them. Gasps moved through the hall. Mrs. Fletcher clutched her shawl tighter. Blackwood shifted uneasily. Slack's pencil scratched the page. So, she wanted you to lie. Yes, Timothy's voice cracked. She wanted me to pretend, to sell rubbish as if I had carved it, to put my name on things that weren't mine. She said if I refused, she would take away my stall forever. He looked at his calloused hands. I said no. I couldn't. My father carved before me. My grandfather too. It's all I know. All I have. Slack's tone was sharp. And how did she respond? Timothy's eyes darkened. She laughed. She said the market had no room for dreamers. She said tradition was dead, that I should stop, clinging to the past. His voice grew firmer now. She told me I would be finished here, that she'd see to it personally. Slack tapped his notes. So, you lost everything if you didn't bend? Yes. Timothy's voice was flat. I was ruined either way. If I bent, my craft was a lie. If I refused, I had no stall. The hall was silent. The fire hissed softly. The weight of Margaret Thornfield's cruelty pressed against them all. Slack glanced at Marple. Her needles clicked faintly, but her eyes were fixed on Timothy. Did you ever threaten her? Slack asked. Timothy shook his head. I thought about it, but no, I couldn't. I only told her she was wrong, that people would always want something real, something made with care. He lowered his gaze. She smiled, said no one wanted care anymore. They wanted packaging. The vendors stirred. The words cut deep. Margaret had dismissed not only Timothy, but all of them. Slack closed his notebook with a snap. That will be all. Timothy sat down heavily. His hands trembled. His future was as broken as the toys he could not sell. Miss Marple's knitting slowed, then stopped. Her voice was soft, yet clear. She wasn't only replacing goods. Her eyes swept the room. She was replacing people. Inspector Slack's eyes moved to the market manager. Blackwood, your turn. The man shifted in his chair. His hands clutched his hat. Sweat glistened on his brow despite the cold. He looked older than his years. Slack's voice was firm. You worked closest with her. What do we need to know? Blackwood hesitated. His lips moved, but no words came at first. Then he sighed. The stress, Inspector. It has been unbearable. The hall fell quiet. All leaned closer. She raised fees every year, he continued. Each time she said it was for repairs, for decorations, for improvements. But nothing changed. The lights were bought by us. The stalls mended by us. The money she gathered vanished. Mrs. Fletcher muttered, I knew it. Blackwood nodded slowly. I asked her once, politely, where it all went. She told me it was not my concern, that I should stay in my place, that I should be grateful she allowed me to manage what was left. Timothy clenched his fists. She spoke like a queen. Yes, Blackwood agreed, like a queen who ruled us all. And I was her servant. Slack leaned forward. Did you keep records? Blackwood looked ashamed. Yes, I kept books of my own, copies of payments. I could see the gaps, money missing. Large sums. She was diverting it. I don't know where. Miss Marple's eyes glinted. Not for herself, perhaps. For her plans with Mr. Hendris. Blackwood swallowed. Likely. She wanted this market turned into a business. A chain. She needed investors, and she bled us dry to tempt them. Gasps rippled through the room. The betrayal deepened. Slack's jaw hardened. So, she stole from every one of you, to build something you would never see. Yes, Blackwood whispered, and she enjoyed it. Each new demand was delivered with a smile, as if she relished the power. She took pleasure in watching us scramble to pay. Mrs. Fletcher spat out, "She crushed us." Blackwood's shoulders sagged. I wanted to stop her. I thought about resigning, but I feared what she would do if I left. She knew things about me. Weaknesses. Failures. She could have ruined me. Slack's eyes sharpened. What weaknesses? Blackwood shook his head. Not tonight, but know this, she held me in her hand, and she was ready to close her fist. The hall was silent again. Only the fire cracked. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. Blackwood looked at the floor. His voice dropped lower. I think yesterday was meant to be my last day, too. The words struck like a blow. The vendors gasped. Slack's pencil froze. Marple's knitting needles fell still. For the first time, suspicion turned on the market manager himself. Inspector Slack spread his notes across the town hall table. The fire burned low. The vendors sat in uneasy silence. Miss Marple watched from the corner, her needles moving slowly. Slack cleared his throat. Let me tell you what I see so far. He tapped the first page. Margaret raised fees every year. She threatened stalls. She shifted spaces. Every vendor here suffered. Murmurs rippled. No one disagreed. He tapped the second page. She made demands. Each of you received ultimatums. Upscale or be gone. Change your goods or lose your stall. Pay more or step aside. Mrs. Fletcher spoke bitterly. She told me this would be my last Christmas. Timothy's voice was strained. She wanted me to sell factory toys with my name on them. Slack nodded curtly. Yes, she stripped you of your pride. She stripped you of your place. Blackwood lifted his weary head. She drained money, vanished into her pockets or her schemes. And I was her pawn. Slack slapped the papers down. All 12 of you. Every single vendor. Each of you received notice on the same day. The 15th of December. The day before she died. Gasps sounded. The room tensed. She chose that day, Slack said. She chose it to make her power clear. She meant to stand here at this market and show she ruled all of you. The vendors shifted uneasily. They remembered the sting of her words, the weight of her threats, the fear she planted. Mrs. Fletcher muttered, "She wanted us ruined." Slack's tone was sharp. "And one of you wanted her stopped." The fire cracked loudly. Shadows jumped against the walls. The silence was heavy. Slack paced. She poisoned no one else, just herself. Or rather, the cup she always drank. The thermos. Her private ritual. Timothy whispered. She boasted about it. Yes, Slack said. Only a person close to this market knew she drank from it. Only someone here understood her pattern. That tells me the killer was not a stranger. It was one of you. All eyes darted nervously. Suspicion thickened. Friends avoided each other's gaze. Mrs. Fletcher pressed her hands together. You mean to say we all had motive, but only one had the chance? Slack nodded grimly. That's right. The room grew still. The air felt close, heavy with unspoken truths. Miss Marple's knitting slowed, then stopped. Her voice was quiet, but her words cut deep. She chose the day she would betray them all. Her gaze drifted to the notes spread on the table. The 15th was her triumph. She thought she had secured her future. She looked up, her eyes sharp as glass. But someone else chose it as her last. The room shuddered with silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Every heart beat faster. The truth was simple. Every vendor had reason. Every vendor had rage. And one had turned rage into murder. The morning after, frost still coated the square. The stall stood empty. The laughter of the market was gone. A constable called out from near the fountain. "Inspector! Something here." Inspector Slack strode over. Miss Marple followed, her step slow but steady. The constable bent low. In his gloved hand lay a small object, a Christmas ornament, glass, delicate, painted with red and gold swirls. Slack frowned. "Dropped?" The constable shook his head. "No, sir. Placed. Set at the edge of the fountain. Careful. Almost deliberate." Marple leaned closer. Her eyes studied the fragile piece. It did not shine like new. It looked old, worn with years, treasured. Slack held it up for the crowd gathering nearby. Anyone recognize this? The vendors peered. Some shook their heads. Some whispered. Then Mrs. Fletcher gasped softly. "I've seen one like it. Long ago." Slack pressed. "Where?" She hesitated. "In Mrs. Peaton's stall. She used to sell them, before Margaret forced her out." The name stirred the crowd. Mrs. Peaton, a founder, one of the first to open a stall in the market. But she had been excluded 2 years ago. Margaret had called her designs too old, too fragile. Slack's eyes narrowed. "Fetch her." An hour later, Mrs. Peaton entered the hall. Her back was straight, her hair grey. Her hands trembled slightly as she removed her gloves. Slack wasted no time. "Mrs. Peaton, do you recognize this ornament?" Her eyes fell on the delicate glass. Her lips parted. Her voice came low. "Yes, I know it." Slack stepped closer. "Yours?" She nodded slowly. "It was my work. Years ago. Hand, blown, painted with care. Part of my collection." Slack's voice sharpened. "Then what was it doing at the scene? Left by the fountain where the body fell?" Mrs. Peaton's shoulders sagged. Her voice quivered. "I don't know." Slack pressed harder. "You were excluded, forced out. You had reason to hate her." Mrs. Peaton looked up, her eyes burning. "Yes, I hated what she did. She told me tradition had no place here. She mocked my work, said my ornaments belonged in the dustbin of memory." The vendors stirred uneasily. Her words rang true. Marple studied her calmly. "And yet, Mrs. Peaton, you kept them. These ornaments, symbols of your craft, symbols of what was lost." Mrs. Peaton's hand trembled as she reached for the ornament. She touched it gently, as if it might shatter under her fingers. Her eyes misted. Her voice broke the silence. "This one I gave to Margaret." Gasps filled the hall. Even Slack's pencil froze mid-note. The confession hung heavy in the air. The hall was hushed. All eyes fixed on Mrs. Peaton. Her hand still lingered on the fragile ornament. Her voice came slowly, heavy with years. "I began with this market," she said. 30 years ago, I was one of the founders. My ornaments hung from every stall. Families came each season to buy one more. Some still have them. I know it." She drew a long breath. Her eyes closed as though pulling memory from dust. For years it was joy. A place for craft, for pride, for community. Her face hardened. Then Margaret took control. Slack leaned forward. "What happened?" "She came with her ideas," Mrs. Peaton whispered. "New packaging, bright ribbons, shiny tags. She said my glasswork was too delicate, too slow. She called it old-fashioned. She told me I was holding the market back." A murmur ran through the vendors. Some nodded they had heard those words too. Too old-fashioned, too slow, too out of step. Mrs. Peaton's voice grew sharper. She told me I was finished. She put me at the far edge, where no customer went. My sales died. Then she told me my place was gone entirely. Her hand shook as she lowered the ornament. She cast me out. After decades of work, after giving my life to this market, she called me history, dead weight. Slack's jaw tightened. "You hated her." Mrs. Peaton's lips thinned. "Yes, I hated what she became, but I never poisoned her." Slack's voice pressed harder. "Then why did this ornament appear at the fountain? On the very night she died?" Mrs. Peaton's eyes filled with sorrow. "I cannot say. I had many of these once, sold them by the dozen. Perhaps it returned through another hand. Or perhaps, she faltered. The room leaned closer. Perhaps, she whispered, Margaret kept it. A trophy. A reminder of what she took from me. Timothy muttered. She would do that. She liked to gloat. Mrs. Fletcher nodded fiercely. Yes, she loved to show what she had conquered. Slack studied Mrs. Peaton carefully. You gave this one to her? Yourself? Mrs. Peaton nodded. Years ago. As a peace offering. She smiled, but her eyes mocked me. I never saw it again. The hall shifted uneasily. The ornament gleamed faintly in the firelight. It seemed to hold more weight than glass should carry. Miss Marple's needles rested in her lap, her eyes fixed on the fragile piece. Her voice was calm, but thoughtful. Sometimes objects speak more than words, she said softly. This ornament may have been left as a symbol, a warning, a reminder that Margaret's betrayal of tradition was not forgotten. She paused. Her gaze lingered on the glass. Or perhaps, she added, her tone sharpening, it was left as a signature. The hall grew still. The question hung heavy in the air. Was the ornament a memory of loss, or the mark of a killer? Inspector Slack spread more papers across the table. His jaw tightened. Look here. A pattern. The vendors leaned forward. The room buzzed with nervous energy. Miss Marple sat quiet, but her needles slowed. Slack tapped his notes. Margaret didn't only force out Mrs. Peaton, she forced out 6 others, 7 founders in all. Each one cast aside. Gasps sounded. The names rolled off his tongue. Baker, weaver, toy maker, brewer, candle maker, potter, Mrs. Peaton. All had begun the market, all had been told to leave. Mrs. Fletcher whispered. She gutted the heart of it. Timothy's face tightened. She threw out those who made it what it was. She called it progress. Slack continued. And I've spoken with 2 of them already. They didn't vanish. They met. Quietly. In back rooms, in kitchens, in pubs. They met to talk of what she'd done, of what they'd lost. The room stirred uneasily. 7 betrayed. 7 bitter. 7 who might want revenge. Blackwood rubbed his temples. She wanted new blood. She said the old names made the market look tired, but she never said she'd replace nearly all of them. Slack's gaze swept the hall. 7 voices silenced, but not forgotten, and now Margaret is silenced too. Mrs. Peaton lifted her chin. Do not twist this, Inspector. We met, yes. We spoke of our anger, but words only. We did not kill. Slack shot back. And yet, anger like that festers. It grows. It finds a target. And last night, it found hers. The fire hissed. Snow tapped against the windows. The air grew thick with unease. Then Slack's constable entered with another bundle of papers. Sir, found this in her strong box. Locked. Hidden under false bottom. Slack took them, unfolded them. The pages gleamed with sharp print. Letterhead. Company seals. Contracts. His eyes hardened. Business plans. With Hendris & Co., they weren't whispers. They were signed. The vendors leaned closer. Slack read aloud. Proposal. The street. Mary Mead Market shall be franchised into a chain of permanent holiday villages. Each location overseen by Hendris & Company vendors shall be contracted or replaced as necessary. The crowd gasped. Franchised. Chains. No longer their own. No longer a village market. A corporation. Mrs. Fletcher covered her mouth. She sold us. Timothy's face went pale. She planned to erase us. Entirely. Slack flipped to the last page. His voice darkened. Signing date, December 16th. The room froze. December 16th. Tomorrow. Slack looked at them all. She meant to sign away the market tomorrow. Her betrayal was not complete. But someone made sure she would never hold a pen again. All eyes turned to one another. The vendetta was no longer rumor. It was proof. Miss Marple's gaze lingered on the contracts. The truth of motive grew heavier still, and the date of betrayal stood written in black ink. Inspector Slack spread the papers wider. His finger tapped the date again and again. December 16th. Tomorrow. That's when she meant to sign. The vendors shifted uneasily. Each face was drawn, pale. The fire popped in the grate. Outside, snow fell heavier, muffling the village. Slack's voice was hard. But she didn't wait until the signing. She acted the day before, December 15th. Yesterday. She delivered her final blows then. Mrs. Fletcher's lips tightened. Yes, she told me I was finished. I heard it with my own ears. Timothy Mills nodded. She told me the same. Said I would never have a stall again. Said it was over for me. Blackwood rubbed his temples. She cornered me too. Demanded the last of the fees. Told me my role was done. She was moving forward without me. Slack scribbled the notes quickly. Ultimatums. All on the same day. 12 vendors. 12 betrayals. All yesterday. The vendors looked at one another. Realization sank deeper. Margaret had not simply ruled them harshly. She had chosen a day to end them all. Mrs. Peaton's eyes burned. She wanted her triumph. To stand in the square, in her stall, surrounded by her false traditions, and crush us, all at once, in one sweep. Slack snapped his notebook shut, and instead, someone crushed her. The words landed like a hammer. No one spoke. The only sound was the hiss of the fire and the low moan of wind beyond the hall. Miss Marple stirred. Her knitting lay still on her lap. Her eyes, sharp as ever, moved slowly across the room. She chose December 15th, Marple said quietly. The day before her signing. She chose it for her victory. To show you all she was untouchable. To take from each of you not just your stalls, but your dignity. Timothy whispered. She wanted us broken. Yes, Marple said. She wanted you powerless. That is why she gave the ultimatums together. Not one by one. Together. To bind you in fear. To leave you hopeless. The silence deepened. Every vendor remembered their final conversation with Margaret. The last cold smile. The last sharp words. Mrs. Fletcher's eyes filled with tears. She meant to destroy us before Christmas. Marple's voice remained calm, which means her murder was not random. It was not chance. It was not temper. Slack frowned. You mean planned? Yes, Marple said softly. It was timed. Timed to stop her forever. Timed to strike at the very moment she believed she had won. The fire cracked loudly. The words hung in the smoky air. Not random. Planned. An execution dressed in holiday cheer. And every vendor knew. Margaret Thornfield's last day of trust had been chosen with care. The evening deepened. The village lay silent under snow. Miss Marple sat by her fire, needles resting, when a knock rattled her door. She rose slowly and opened it. Mr. Blackwood stood there, his hat pulled low, his coat dusted white, his eyes haunted. May I come in, Miss Marple? She nodded. He stepped inside, stamping snow from his boots. In his hands he carried a worn leather satchel. He placed it carefully on her table. Marple poured him tea. He did not drink. Instead, he opened the satchel. Papers spilled out. Ledgers. Receipts. Lists of names and numbers. These are mine, he said softly. My records. Not hers. Marple adjusted her spectacles. Her eyes moved slowly across the neat columns. Payments. Dates. Fees collected. And gaps. Large gaps. She took more than she declared. Marple murmured. Yes. His voice trembled. She raised fees far beyond what she reported. She claimed they were for the market, for repairs. But nothing was repaired. Nothing was improved. He leaned forward. Look here. Year after year, the money grows, but the market does not. Marple turned a page. The numbers screamed of corruption. Where did it go? She asked gently. Blackwood's shoulders sagged. To Hendris. To investors. To her grand schemes. She drained us all to build her dream. A dream we never asked for. Marple closed the book. Her eyes studied him. Yet you kept copies. Why? Blackwood's lips pressed tight. Because I feared her. And because I had to protect myself. His voice cracked. She accused me once, said I was incompetent, said if the truth came out, it would be me who fell. I needed proof that she was the thief, not I. He ran a trembling hand through his hair. But that is not all. Marple waited. Her silence was gentle, patient. I took money too, he whispered. Her eyes narrowed slightly. How so? His confession poured out. I embezzled, not for myself, not for luxury, but to help the vendors she crushed. When she demanded their fees, I sometimes returned part quietly, from the collections, so they could survive, so they would not starve. He gripped the edge of the table. I thought it was mercy, a secret mercy, but she found out. She discovered my books. Marple's gaze sharpened. When? 2 nights ago, she told me she would expose me, ruin me, have me arrested. His hands shook violently. She said she would not only take my work, but my name, my honor. She left me nothing, nothing at all. The fire crackled softly. The truth hung between them. Blackwood's eyes filled with despair. I embezzled Miss Marple, and she knew. She was ready to destroy me. The words fell heavy in the quiet room. Another motive, another secret, and another reason Margaret Thornfield had not lived to see her signing day. Mr. Blackwood's hands trembled as he folded the ledgers shut. His eyes looked hollow. She cornered me, Miss Marple. She left me no choice. Marple's voice was quiet. How did she press you? She said she would expose me, he whispered. She knew I'd taken money. Even if I had returned it to others, it was still theft. She said she'd march into Slack's office, lay the books on his desk, and have me ruined. He drew a shaky breath. But she offered me a way out, a bargain. Marple's needles clicked once, then stilled. What bargain? That I would help her, he said, that I would betray the others, give her names, accounts, secrets, anything she could use to crush to them faster. She wanted me to act as her eyes, her knife, her shield. His voice broke. She told me if I obeyed, I might keep my post. If I refused, I would be in prison by New Year. Marple's gaze sharpened. So, you agreed? Blackwood bowed his head. For a moment, I was terrified. I nodded, but later, I could not. To betray them all, it was worse than prison, worse than disgrace. I could not do it. He looked at her with desperate eyes. Do you understand, Miss Marple? She forced me into a corner. She made me choose between ruin and treachery. Marple's reply was calm. Yes, that was her way. To twist loyalty into fear, to use weakness as rope. Blackwood pressed his hands against his face. She threatened to come for me again. She said she would give me until the 15th. After that, my fate was sealed. He dropped his hands. His eyes burned with sleepless fire. That was yesterday. Yesterday she told me my hour had come. The words chilled the room. The fire hissed faintly. The air seemed to press closer. Marple spoke gently. And last night she died. Yes, he breathed, by poison, from her own cup. And I was free. The words echoed, strangely, half relief, half guilt. Marple leaned forward. Her voice was low, steady. You had motive to silence her. Strong motive. She held your life in her hand. And yet, she glanced toward the fire, her eyes distant. You were not the only one. She cornered Mrs. Fletcher. She mocked Timothy. She cast out Mrs. Peaton. She drained them all. Every vendor, every founder, every rival. She betrayed them together. Her voice fell to a whisper, almost to herself. One may have struck, but all had reason. The words lingered. The room grew still. The crackle of flame was the only sound. Blackwood bowed his head once more. I did not kill her, but I wished I had the strength. Marple's gaze softened, though her thoughts ran sharp. Her reflection hung heavy in the air. He had motive to silence her, she murmured. Her eyes lifted to the dark window, where snow fell against the glass. But so did many others. The town hall was cold that night. The vendors gathered again. Tension hung thicker than the smoke from the fire. Inspector Slack stood firmly at the front, his gaze fixed on Mrs. Peaton. "Enough whispers," he said. "Time we speak plain." She lifted her chin. Her grey hair glinted in the firelight. Her face was calm, but her eyes sharp. "You hated her," Slack pressed. "She ruined your place, mocked your craft, drove you out." Mrs. Peaton's voice was steady. "Yes, she did all that. And yet you knew much more than simple rivalry," Slack continued. "You knew about her finances. You knew about her dealings with Hendris, didn't you?" The room stirred. The vendors looked at her, surprised. Mrs. Peaton hesitated, then spoke. "She boasted to me once. After she forced me out, she still came to visit. She wanted me to know she was building something greater. She spoke of investors, of figures, of plans." Slack's eyes narrowed. "So you knew the truth. You knew she was bleeding the market dry." "Yes," Mrs. Peaton said bitterly. "And I warned others. I told them she would destroy everything. No one listened." "Mrs." Fletcher muttered. "We all thought it was gossip." Slack leaned closer. "And when you were cast out, you met with the other founders, didn't you?" Mrs. Peaton's lips thinned. "Yes, we spoke. We mourned what we'd lost. We plotted how we might save it. But plotting is not poison, Inspector." Slack's tone hardened. "You had motive. You had rage. And perhaps you had opportunity." She looked at him sharply. "You accuse me? I question you," Slack said. "Because we found more than an ornament. We found your name in her notes. Margins filled with insults. Peaton weak, outdated, useless. She mocked you even in private." Her hands trembled at the words, but she did not answer. Slack continued. "And there is something else, something practical." He nodded to his constable, who stepped forward with a small file. Slack opened it slowly. "These records show your purchases for your craft: glasswork, paints, adhesives, but also chemicals. Strong ones, dangerous ones, used to etch glass, used to frost designs." The vendors shifted uneasily. Chemicals, poison. The words hung heavy. Slack's voice was grim. "One of them was potassium cyanide, bought months ago, ordered under your name." Gasps filled the hall. All eyes swung toward Mrs. Peaton. Her face froze. Her hands clutched the arms of her chair. Slack's voice cut sharp. "You had access to cyanide, the very poison that killed Margaret Thornfield." The hall erupted in whispers. Mrs. Fletcher's voice rose above them. "She could have done it. She had the means." Timothy stared wide-eyed. "She told us she hated her. She said Margaret ruined her life." The fire snapped loudly. The shadows seemed to deepen around Mrs. Peaton. Her lips parted, but no words came. The ornament gleamed faintly in the firelight beside her, and the accusation hung heavy. Inspector Slack's voice thundered the final blow. "You, Mrs. Peaton, had motive, hatred, and the poison itself." The hall fell silent. All waited for her reply. The snow fell heavier outside. The hall glowed dim with lamplight. One by one, the suspects gathered. Mrs. Fletcher with her shawl tight. Timothy Mills pale and silent. Mr. Blackwood with papers clutched close. Mrs. Peaton stiff, eyes sharp. Others huddled in uneasy clusters. At the front, Inspector Slack paced. But it was Miss Marple who spoke first, her voice soft, her words cutting. "We must look at what is true," she said. "Not rumor, not bitterness, but truth." The hall quieted. Even Slack paused. Marple's needles rested in her lap. Her gaze moved from face to face. "Margaret Thornfield was poisoned," she began. "Not through the mulled wine given to customers. No, through her private thermos, her ritual drink. Everyone here knew she kept it. Everyone here saw her boast of it." She let the silence stretch. The killer had knowledge. The killer had timing. She lifted a small notebook, her own, filled with neat lines. She turned a page slowly. "Mrs. Fletcher, you were told this was your last Christmas. You had rage in your heart. But you did not linger by her stall. Mrs. Fletcher shifted uneasily, her lips pressed together. "Timothy," Marple continued, "she mocked your craft, tried to force you to sell false toys, but you packed your goods early. Witnesses saw you leave before the square emptied." Timothy's eyes fell to the floor. "Mr. Blackwood, you feared her blackmail. You feared prison. You confessed to me privately. But you were with the constables when the cup was poured." Blackwood's hands trembled on his satchel. "Mrs. Peaton, you were cast out. You had hatred. And yes, you had cyanide for your craft. But your timing? Witnesses place you at home, sick that night. You were seen before the fire. You could not have slipped into the square unseen." Slack's eyebrows rose. He frowned, but said nothing. The vendors stirred. Confusion, relief, suspicion. Marple raised her hand gently. "Each of you carried resentment. Each of you wished her gone. But motive is not enough. Words are not enough. Only action matters." She leaned forward. Her eyes sharpened. "The question is not who hated her. You all did. The question is, who slipped poison into her cup within the hour? Who stayed behind long enough to strike?" The room grew colder. The fire hissed in protest. No one spoke. No one moved. Marple's voice softened further, almost to a whisper. "Only one of you placed poison in the cup." Her gaze swept the room once more. "But all of you placed resentment in your hearts." The words echoed. The hall sat in stunned silence. Each suspect carried guilt, whether or not their hands touched the poison. The truth lay near, but the question of who still gripped them all. The hall was silent. The fire burned low. Faces turned toward Miss Marple. Every breath seemed to wait on her words. She folded her notebook. Her eyes lifted, and she spoke. "The poisoner was not driven only by spite," she said. "Not only by anger, not only by humiliation. The truth was colder, and at the same time, more desperate." The vendors stirred uneasily. Slack's pencil hovered. Marple looked to the crowd. To strike Margaret Thornfield was to strike before December 16th. To stop her from signing away the market, to stop her from selling all of you into chains. Her voice softened. The killer did not act for profit, nor for revenge alone. The killer acted to save the market. Gasps broke the hush. Mrs. Fletcher clutched her shawl tighter. Timothy stared. Blackwood froze, his eyes wide. Marple's hand moved slowly, pointing. To save the market, it had to be someone who knew the contract. Someone who knew the investor's plan. Someone who feared that tomorrow would end everything. Her eyes settled. "Mr. Blackwood," the room erupted. Voices shouted. Accusations flew. Blackwood staggered back. No, I didn't." Marple's voice cut through the chaos. "You confessed to me that she found your secret books. She threatened you. She gave you until December 15th, yesterday. She made your ruin certain. You knew she would sign tomorrow. You knew the market would die with her pen." Her eyes held his. "You slipped back to the stall. You knew her ritual. You poured her drink. And you made certain she would never taste victory." Blackwood's face broke. His shoulders slumped. Tears slid down his cheeks. "I had no choice," he whispered. "She would have destroyed us all. She would have sold every stall, every craft, every memory. I couldn't let it happen. I killed her to save the market." The hall shook with disbelief. Mrs. Fletcher gasped. Timothy buried his face in his hands. Mrs. Peaton closed her eyes, whispering a prayer. Slack stepped forward grimly. "Blackwood, you'll answer for this. Murder is no salvation." Constables moved to take him. His satchel slipped from his hand. Papers spilled. Proof of his fight. Proof of his fall. The hall was quiet again. Only Marple's voice remained. "She betrayed your trust," she said softly. And trust betrayed her. In the end, Christmas belongs not to the powerful, not to the greedy, not to the false. It belongs to those who keep it true. Her words lingered like the last toll of a bell. The snow pressed against the windows. The fire flickered low. The villagers sat in silence, each holding both sorrow and relief. Blackwood was led away. The market would survive. But its joy would never be the same. Miss Marple gathered her knitting. She rose. She walked slowly to the door. Her last words hung in the hush. Thank you for listening. Until our next mystery.